Thank you, Betsy. So really quickly, our main focus in developing the inventory roll forward process was we have a lot of clients and that need inventory, and it plays a critical role. And Maximo has a lot of reports out of the box designed to help you kind of track your inventory. But what we found is a lot of the existing options don't really address what our clients were looking for. The biggest request that we often get is the ability to be able to track inventory from a historical perspective. So, especially annual comparisons, what was my inventory balance in January of 2011 compared to January of 2012, that kind of stuff. They also want to be able to do monthly, quarterly, etc. But all the information that Maximo stores, for the most part, is point in time. So your current balance, your current cost, and so that makes it so you can't report against it. So the first part of our inventory roll forward process is the idea of doing a nightly audit of all the information required for doing this historical reporting. We retain all that data for a minimum of 60 days, with the first of every month being stored indefinitely. The reason why we wanted to go this route is we needed to enable the monthly, quarterly, annually reporting. And so we need to keep a particular day from every month so that you can do the reporting. In addition to that, we wanted to be able to have shorter timelines. So some of our clients, if something went wrong, they needed to be able to figure out what exactly went wrong. If you have an item that has hundreds or thousands of transactions, that monthly comparison is not necessarily enough detail to figure out what went wrong. So by storing daily, we allow you to do day-to-day comparisons, week-to-week comparisons, whatever you need in order to figure out what went wrong. Then after the 60 days, our assumption is any of those issues would have already been identified and tracked. So we purge that data to help performance. There's a lot of tables that we're auditing. We have clients with hundreds of thousands of items in inventory, so keeping a copy of that data for every single day would just negatively impact performance of the report. So after the archiving process, we have the data. We now can report on it. We obviously need a report to do that. So rather than trying to explain to you necessarily everything, I think I'm going to kind of focus more on the demo piece of it, and I'm going to try to show you what's going on. So here's just a pretty standard request page. You've seen it in Maximo many times. We have 4 parameters: site, storeroom, start date, end date. All of these are optional parameters, meaning you don't have to provide them. For site and storeroom, you can run it for multiple. So you can run it for, say, all sites in a particular organization, or you can choose to run it for just certain storerooms for a particular site. In addition to that, the start and end date, when the data is not provided, we do some kind of dynamic calculation. So in the case that you don't provide a start and end date, what we do is we look and see when the report is being run. So if you don't provide a start and end date and the date is currently the 1st of the month, we're going to assume that you're trying to do a monthly comparison. So we're going to do the 1st of the previous month to the current date. The reason for that is we wanted our clients to be able to schedule the report. And Maximo doesn't allow you to have dynamic date parameters. So you can't say, I want the 1st of the previous month to the 1st of the current month. So by making these optional parameters and doing the date calculation, you can schedule this report and we'll figure that out for you. We also allow other combinations. So say, for instance, you provide a start date, such as January 1st of 2015, and don't provide an end date. We'll assume that you want the end date to be the current date, so that way you can do your annual comparison, figure out how much inventory you've used to date, and what the changes of inventory value, what the totals of all the transactions were, etc. We also will provide a grouping in total once you run these reports. So if you run it for every site, you're still obviously going to need totals for each of the sites, totals for each of the storerooms in the site. So basically, we just allow you to have one report that could be run, but we'll still show you all the data at the more granular level that you need. So really quickly, I'm just going to run this for our test site, Bedford, and I'm going to do just a monthly comparison. So we'll say, so it takes a few seconds for the report to run as it builds out all the calculations, looks at our archived data, but all right. So as you can tell, relatively simple looking report, nothing too crazy. You know, we show item number, description. We can show some other fields if required. But then we start to show you all the key data that you need to know for this particular part. So we show what your balance was at the beginning of the date range, what the value of it was, what your ending balance ended up being, what the ending value ended up being, etc., etc., etc. And total all this across your storeroom here. And then, as you can see, each page is its own storeroom. So I can quickly see that we had one part in the Boney storeroom. We have multiple parts in the central storeroom. All of these have their own totals. So it's a pretty simple looking report, easy to pass off to an accountant, a high-level manager, whoever, and they can kind of figure out what's going on. Where this report becomes particularly valuable is once we have that historical information and we know what changed between the 2 points in time, we can actually try and identify any type of inventory discrepancy. So, for example, if our balance at the end of the month went up by 7 and I have receipts of 8 and I don't have any other transactions, I know that something went wrong. So what you'll notice in this report is some kind of discrepancy occurs, whether it's any quantity discrepancy, no matter how small, or any value discrepancy greater than $1, we'll show it to you in this report. We'll highlight the entire row in gray, flag it as what we call a reconciliation problem, and then total all those for you, again, per storeroom and per site. So in this particular example for Central, as I'm scrolling through the list, I'll come across an item, Z-Rag, and it's highlighted. So instantly it draws my attention to this line, and I try to figure out what went wrong. So our balance went up 174, and the value went up $1,737.24. So looking at the transaction, I can see that we had a receipt for 174, so that matches up. Our receipt matched the balance change, so it's not a balance change issue. But if I look at it, the value of the receipts were $1,738.26. So $1.02 difference between what our actual inventory value says it is compared to what the receipt transaction was for. Now, in this particular case, there's not really much you can do. The reason why this happens is when Maximo calculates the average cost, there is going to be rounding. So the best solution to kind of get around these issues where you have high quantity, high value changes is you want to track the average cost potentially at more decimal places. So in this case, in our test system, we only let average cost be 2 decimal places, so it has to round. And that 1 penny difference is going to make a big difference in calculating the dollar. When you go up a penny or go down a penny and your quantity is 174, that could change it up to $1.74. So changing the average cost to make it more specific will make it so that you hopefully don't have as many of these rounding issues. But again, rounding is to be expected, so there is always potentially going to be a little bit of a discrepancy, which is why we set the threshold as $1. Typically, any discrepancy is going to be much larger than $1, at which point you want to know about it. So moving on, I'm going to switch to another storeroom. And for the storeroom garage, I'm going to notice a lot more problems highlighted. And I'm looking at, we'll start with item 0-0031. And our balance went up by quantity 1, a value of $2.50, but yet we're showing 2 transfers for a total of $5. So we have a balance discrepancy and we have a value discrepancy. So at this point, I want to know more about why it's showing 2 transfers and why our balance doesn't show the correct value. So what I would do is I'd take this item number and I'd put it into Maximo, pull up the inventory record. So that's the right storeroom. So this is for Central and Bedford, or Garage in Bedford. Alright, so I'm going to view the inventory transaction, and looking at the transfers for the month of August, I do see 2 transfers, one from Bedford Central Storeroom and one from the Fleet site, so one of our sister sites, from one of their storerooms. And so quickly I can see these look like 2 very legitimate transactions, but the maximum balance is incorrect. Now, in this particular case, we intentionally broke it. That way we could show you the record. But with the power of the archiving of the data, in the case of a Maximo bug, for instance, where maybe this transfer really didn't actually update the balance as it should have, we can use this data, look at the Maximo system, figure out what caused the problem, work with IBM to get it fixed, but you proactively know, hey, our balance is actually incorrect for this item inside of this storeroom because of these transactions. So that's really kind of one of the key pieces of the report, is trying to be able to get that historical data, validate the data as provided. So the other thing that we wanted to kind of quickly highlight is, at a high level, like I said, you can share this report with an accountant, you could share it with an executive manager, whatever. It's all one simple report. What a lot of our clients are currently doing is they're taking the 4 Maximo reports, your inventory balance report, your issues in transfer, or your issues in returns, receipts and transfers, and inventory adjustments, and they're trying to run them for all their different parts that they're looking into. So in this case, I'm going to look at transfers for this particular item. Out of box, all these reports are designed to be run at a particular item level and in a particular storeroom and for a particular site. So it's not very flexible from a reporting perspective. In our report, you notice there's no parameter for item number. You don't have to provide an item number. We'll run it across every storeroom that's provided. Oh, I got the two flipped up. I put the wrong site. So let me do this again. Storeroom equals garage, site equals Bedford. 115. And then after that, especially when you're talking about adjustments, when you forward it on to the accountant, they're looking for only certain types of transactions. So for instance, if you adjust the standard cost on a part that's average cost, it's still going to show up in the adjustments report, but it means nothing from an actual inventory value perspective. Same thing with physical count. When you do a physical count adjustment, it means absolutely nothing from a Maximo inventory perspective. Our report only shows the transactions that directly impact the value of your inventory or the balance of your inventory. So you don't have all that distracting data that you need to explain to other people what it all means. I think at a quick high level, that's essentially the report. I did want to add just a few little tidbits in case people may ask questions about it. We do support condition-enabled items. So for those that don't know, you can tie conditions to an item to say, like, this is a new item, this is a used item, and it tracks costs for all those independently. We do support those. We support standard and average costs currently. We don't support LIFO, FIFO, but if you have interest in using those costing methods, it's something we could do. We just don't currently do it today. We only support Maximo 7.5 and Maximo 7.6. So obviously you have to be running one of those versions in order to be able to add this functionality. And the really, really key piece is, as great as this functionality is, it's not something we can turn on retroactively, meaning you can run this, it will show you the data from the day that we turn it on to whenever in the future. But unfortunately, we can't go back and audit all of your other legacy data. So for instance, if you've been running Maximo since January 1 of 2011, you're not going to be able to use this to report against it. We just simply don't have that data for you. So there's one thing to take into consideration if you're interested in this report. It's only going to help you moving forward. But I think with that, I'm going to switch it back to Betsy.
Thanks, Stephen, for a great demonstration of inventory roll forward. We did have one question come through, and someone asked if the report can be emailed to non-Maximo users.
Sure. So yeah, we definitely support emailing to just anybody, any email address. Doesn't have to be a Maximo person.
Okay, just like any other report in Maximo.
Yeah.
Great. I don't see any other questions coming through right now, but if you do have any further questions regarding the inventory roll forward solution, feel free to email me directly. My contact information is up on the screen at bambrocious@projetech.com. And again, we'll be sending out a link to this webinar for your convenience this week. Also, we will be sending an invite for our next webinar, which is scheduled for next Wednesday, September 9th at 2 p.m. You can see it on your screen as well. We will be covering the Maps feature available in Core Maximo. So a nice feature that's available for in Core that's not an add-on solution that we wanted to kind of cover for some of the users out there. So again, thank you again for taking the time out of your day and attending the webinar this morning.